Did that work out okay?
Yeah, it was fine.
Beautiful.
But your video's sideways.
Oh, let me fix
Yeah.
that. Hang on.
Unless you want to do that for artistic effect.
I mean, you know,
Yeah. I don't know how well that'll come across though. I don't know.
yeah, I feel like that might get lost
After
in
about 20
translation.
minutes, people are going to start having a headache and, we have to
just
be
a constant,
compassionate after all, right?
right? Just a constant neck crick.
Yeah. Man. So yeah, thanks for coming on, brother. Appreciate
Hey,
it.
my pleasure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me, man.
So this is brother Parth Patel. It's Parth, right? Or Parth?
Yeah. No, Parth. Parth is right.
Parth. Like a TH, the sound, or
The
like
sound.
Parth?
No, TH sound at the end of it.
Okay, Parth Patel. That's great. So yeah, I mean, I have I think a lot of mutual interests with you. We've chatted a bit on the side. Are you from India originally or Pakistan? I can't remember.
So I was actually born and raised in the western suburbs of St. Louis, Missouri.
That's right.
Traditionally, though, my family comes from India. So
India.
Yeah.
When you say traditionally, you mean like your grandparents or your parents actually came?
Yeah. So my grandparents and parents are first generation nationalized.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and I am the first. Born American. So.
Oh, you're the first born American. I got you.
Yeah.
Okay. So you still have good roots to the Indian culture.
I try to. Yeah.
At least you're eating some of that good food at home sometimes.
I mean, yeah, this morning's breakfast included some strawberries, some blueberries, and some yogurt. So
yeah, yogurt ties in.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Krishna loves yogurt and butter.
Yeah. I mean, they talk about the it's part of his like celestial pastimes, right? Is going up to the little cowgirls and stealing all their buttermilk and their yogurt. Yeah.
Right. And that's that could be seen symbolically too, as when you think of like, butter and cream and milk sweets, sweets made with milk and cream, maybe sweet rice or rice pudding, things like that. You think about bliss and sort of ecstasy and that cooling feeling, that could come from total tranquility and peace and abundant joy.
Absolutely. There's that whole idea of like satisfaction, right? Like even within an Indian meal, right?
Oh, yeah.
You eat all the hot, spicy stuff, and then how do you finish it off? You finish it off with like a cool lassi, or you finish it off with like a rice pudding. Yes. There's even science behind that, right? Like all of the spicy foods takes the pH level of your stomach, and we drop it down even lower than it already is. And now what we're doing is we're using something that's essentially neutral or basic to help, mildly basic, depending on what kind of milk you drink and all that jazz. And we're taking that and we're bringing that right back into balance.
That's right. And I always crave that after an Indian meal. I like sweet rice a lot, that's one of my favorites. I like good burfi. I know Indians have a lot of milk sweets and I love them, but I don't like them when they're over sweetened. And that tends to be how much of that stuff is made nowadays. Too much sugar. And it's not good. I don't like it. It's like putting too much salt to me. Like salt's good, but not too much. It's not good anymore.
Anything in excess, right? It's right. Like anything in excess is considered poison to the body.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, it's about that harmony, that balance. So Brother Parth, maybe we can start off as we typically do, with a little. We already dug in a little bit on your history, but learn more about Parth. Where you come from. Maybe major things that have influenced you in your life. I don't know what you studied and how you got into Masonry. It's sort of your a biography, maybe of 5-10 minutes, something like that.
Yeah, for sure. So, I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. I come from, as we kind of talked about, come from a very rich, very deep Indian background. Growing up, we grew up in a multi-generational family. So my grandmothers basically raised me. And they were They were the ones who really sort of imbibed the original cultural values, sort of, and what I build a lot of my even sort of my esoteric traditions on is a direct homage to them. And grew up right here outside the suburbs. Nothing really out of the ordinary. I actually have 3 degrees. So
Wait, you actually have what? 3 what?
3 degrees. So I went to college, and when I went to college,
Oh, I thought you were going to say entered apprentice, fellow craft, and master mason.
I mean, I have those as well, right? But there's the symbolic 3.
Yes.
So I figured I had to get the 3, and I actually also have 7 minors. So like, I picked up a little bit here and there. So the first time I went to school, I studied history. I also studied acting at that time.
Acting.
I have a BFA in acting.
Man.
Yeah, man.
That's great.
It's one of those weird soft skills that you use so much more than like people are aware of. Like, starving actors, what the hell do they know?
Right.
But man, like those are some of the most useful skills I think I've learned.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
I find it to be invaluable.
Maybe acting should be incorporated into, or the dramatic arts or whatever you want to call it, incorporated into public school system a little better. I wonder if that kids can benefit from that. I don't know. Right.
But there's this I don't know, man. There's this incredible sort of, I think, negative connotation, especially when it comes to men.
Oh yeah.
Especially when, you know what I mean? There's this, it's not a very masculine art.
Right.
I beg to differ. I mean, if you've read Macbeth, like if you want to go be Macbeth, like that dude's one of the most badass guys around, right? Or like if you want to go read, it helps with so many different life skills, I think.
Right.
Well,
I would imagine self-confidence, public speaking would be influenced.
Yeah, but it goes deeper than that, man. It seems like empathy, like your ability to.
Interesting, because you're acting. Right. I see.
You're acting, right? So your ability to perceive something on the pages of a book directly correlates, right, to how you can perceive someone. And even when you're acting, right, you're kind of building repetitions of these patterns, right? Because so much of that is subliminal.
Yeah,
right? It's a vibe, it's a feeling, it's something you can kind of get deep inside you.
Yeah.
And when you're actually acting, right, and you're performing that art, and the vibe is right on, right? It's as close to the real thing as you can get.
Right. Yeah. So so it's almost like I would imagine, when you're practicing the art of acting, it's almost like your empathy muscle gets exercised because you have to put an effort into it to try to empathize. Whatever you practice and becomes a habit. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I distracted us, but you were telling them about your background. You said you studied acting.
I did that. Yep. And then I went and I took my 2 degrees and I opened a restaurant in town. And
what kind of restaurant?
Indian foods of all things. Yeah.
Dude, we gotta hang out, bro.
Yeah, dude. I can't wait.
Yes.
So I did that for about 10 years, and then I decided, I felt like I was doing stuff, yes, but I also sort of felt like I wasn't doing enough. So I actually went back to school and started learning medicine.
Medicine.
Yes, this is a big word. I did that, but I had to put that on hold for a little while. Understanding the joys of single fatherhood is an interesting concept. Kind of working my way through it right now as we speak. So.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, man. Now, when it comes to my background within fraternities and sort of fraternal orders and initiatic experiences and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. My first guru, like I said, were my two grandmothers. Like
Those are some great
initiated. I
gurus
mean,
right there.
right. I mean, so many people I speak to. That's it. That's where it starts.
Yeah.
And then when I was in college, I became a member of Phi Mu Alpha Symphonia, which is a music fraternity of all things. And as part of that process, funnily enough, what actually happened was we're supposed to go around and interview all of the other brothers that are there in an effort to try to get to know them better, very akin to what you're doing here,
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting thing because you leave those conversations kind of knowing the person so much better than just like, oh, hey, yeah, I know this person. I see them on campus, or yeah, they're my brothers. Like whatever, you know what I mean?
That's right. When it comes down to that word you were talking about too, was it Sonder?
Sonder, yeah,
Yes.
absolutely, man. That is probably one of my favorite words in the English language.
Yeah. And I appreciate that word too. I think that's why, I came up with this show idea. It's sort of a play on words like just Masons. Some people might not think about that, but these are just Masons. We're just regular guys. We're average people. But there's also the idea of just, like, virtuous Masons, just and virtuous, justice. So there's that mix there. But I think that, every person we meet, has that divine spark in them. And it really has nothing to do with, what you've achieved in this outward world or anything. It doesn't really matter. None of that really matters. And I think that's where we're all connected to, is on that level of the divine spark, where we're actually all identical, if you look at the oneness idea. And so everybody deserves equal respect, and everybody's equally interesting in my eyes. And so I always find it fascinating to just deep dive and get to know someone and learn about you and your background. I mean, you're a unique individual, and you have unique talents and abilities and powers, some of which, most people don't know about.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think what you're doing here is amazing, because it's so often, I'll see two brothers that have known each other forever.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about? Like forever.
Right.
And much like you were talking about earlier, right? Like with the blissful nature of Krishna, right? Like,
yes, the sweet rice.
So funnily enough, right? My name Parth is actually the name that Krishna uses for Arjun. That's like his name. Nobody else calls him Parth.
Oh, is that like Arjun's nickname?
Krishna? It's Krishna's nickname for Arjun. Because
that's amazing.
They're the best of friends. Like
Krishna's like, yo, Parth, what's up? He's like,
exactly.
I'm Arjuna.
Like, I've got this quandary. How do I keep,
Yeah.
And Krishna's like, listen up, homie. I got you right here.
There you go.
But just like that, when you see two friends conversing and two brothers conversing, right? I always want to be that fly on the wall, because I don't want to interrupt their conversation, because there's a certain amount of serenity to it.
Right.
I just want to be there just to get that little bit of, like, that little bit of bliss myself, just from being in that space.
Wow, so, that's cool. That's really nice. I think that's relaxing too, somehow.
Yeah.
So okay, but you said you have 3 degrees. So one is in history. You have a degree in history.
Yeah. So history, theater, and then biochem, biotech is my third one.
Are they all bachelor's degrees, or are these some of these masters, or what?
They are all bachelor's degrees.
Okay.
My initial inclination was to get yeah.
Oh, so you did a real intense bachelor program where you made yourself get a triple degree, something like that.
Yeah, basically, like I finished 4 years of coursework in 2.
In 2.
In 2.
And then you had to do some additional for the third?
Well, I'm saying in terms of the biochem degree. The other 2 degrees I did at one point, and then about 8 years later, I went back and did, because I needed that foundational, I have a basic understanding of science and math, but when I wanted to go into medicine, like, it was like, well, I really need to, I need to go back and solidify my foundation, right? And so in order to do that, I started learning both medicine and biochemistry concurrently. Like I worked with a lot of physicians doing a lot of hands-on things and a lot of reading and learning through them. And then as I was in the process of going through med school, it was I had to stop. So
I see. So when did you finish your studies?
So my first set of studies were done in 2012.
Okay.
And then my second go around was from 2016 to 2018.
Okay, great. And so how old are you now?
I just turned 30.
Just turned 30. Wow,
Yeah.
congratulations. The
Well,
big 3-0.
thank you. Yeah, the dirty 30.
Yes.
Yeah.
So now when did you start to get into masonry and how did that come about?
Yeah. So I was actually I was doing one of those interviews in my college fraternity. And I had actually, funnily enough, right, just like so many people I think who were my age, I just gotten done reading a lot of the Dan Brown novels that were so very popular at the time. And I saw that one of the brothers from Fly Me Lawful was wearing a Masonic ring. And I was like, hey, can you tell me more about this? I was 20 at the time.
Right.
And he was like, yeah, let's finish this and then we can like, we'll discuss that at some other time. Well, about 2 years later,
some other time.
right. I
pause.
broached the subject with him again. I was like, hey, I know we talked about this a while ago, and tell me more. Like, I'm at the point because you mentioned something to me earlier in one of these Zoom calls that we kind of find ourselves on, and that was you're always moving. You're always doing something or another, and that's very just it's who I am as a person. Like,
yeah, that's right.
This is you often see me sitting in the swing a lot. This is a conscious effort to slow down.
I see. Because you like to busy yourself.
Yeah.
Where is that coming from, do you think, in your family? Because I feel like that could be someone you're modeling from childhood.
My mom's a very busybody.
She's the one.
Is.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I had mentioned it might be your dad, but I don't know, who it was. Because in my memory, I think of some dads that are like, always working, handyman in the house. They can't sit still. They must be fixing, hammering something. So that was my first thought with you. But yeah, your mom, interesting.
Yeah, no. So my parents are actually interesting. They split up when I was 12.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, through a lot of my teenage years, my dad wasn't necessarily, and this is tough. My dad wasn't a bad dad by any stretch of the imagination. But
he's not like a Jeffrey Epstein or anything like that.
No.
So he's not that bad. We always use Jeffrey as the way we sort of compare.
Right, that's the bar, right?
We're all pretty good, We're not so bad.
Are you north or south, right?
Yeah.
Jeffrey.
North or south of Jeffrey. Yes.
But my dad moved to another city, so like the physical distance, and it was always a thing. It became a physical distance, which then became a mental distance, which then became sort of an emotional, spiritual distance. So funnily enough, my dad is also incredibly religious. So when my parents split, my dad kind of went back to his original religious roots. He wasn't necessarily, he was more Western prior to that, but then he really kind of went back to it. We all kind of were also reintroduced to it. And at one point, somewhere between like 16 and 18, I was actually slated to become a monk of all things.
A monk?
Yeah, like an Indian monk. I take monastic vows and like do the whole 9 yards.
But like a Hindu monk?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Shave your head? Would you be like sannyasin, like naked walking through the streets? You were going to do that?
I was going to do that. Like, and this is like my throwback to it, because I've sort of been trying to get back into it, but I eat from one bowl and one cup.
That's awesome, man. That's
You
really
know,
good.
like that's what I do.
Yeah, I've always sort
It,
of slightly dreamed of, being a yogi or something in the past, especially. Um,
yeah, um, you can do it. You can totally do it.
yeah, yeah. Um, but there's something to be said about, not completely retreating from the world. Some say it's selfish, in fact, like to just sit in the cave and meditate feels really good. You're in a lot of bliss, but some would argue you still haven't worked on yourself. If you can't interact with the world, then you're
Oh,
somehow limited. Have you heard that sort of point of view too?
I
Yeah,
have, and like, see, and I straddle that world, in
yeah,
the sense that like I've done a lot of retreating,
yes,
uh, personally. It's just what I've done, um, and you know, I think about that, and there are guys like you know, you texted me and you're like, hey, you want to come on the show tomorrow? And I'm like, yeah, I'd be happy to. Like, nothing would, sure, absolutely. But like, what do I have to contribute to this conversation? Like, I'm not, I don't think I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it's
I want answers. I want to know where God is. No, just kidding.
right. I mean, yeah,
No,
right.
no.
I mean, it's like, I mean, I can tell you my personal experiences, right? But like,
Right, right. That's all we can do.
that's all it
Yeah,
is, man. Like,
yeah.
I'm not going to speak from any place of authority or from any place
No.
of ego, because that's just, I mean, I'm trying to kill that nasty bugger, you
Yeah, you
know?
want to keep expectations low. It's a lot less pressure in general
Yeah,
when you keep your expectations low. It's like less pressure. Feels like
absolutely.
that for me anyway. So I always lower expectations. Even when I do a presentation, I always explain up front. Look, I don't have all the answers. This is just what I've been finding out. These are my own personal insights from some limited research I've done. So please
Yeah.
ask questions.
And
Correct
that's sort of
me,
the
whatever.
right, and that's sort of the
Project.
hard part, isn't it?
What's
Like,
that?
it's like that's the hard part, right? For you to go into the cave, experience bliss.
Yeah.
The hard part is coming back out.
Right.
And like that's what makes the Buddha different from those yogis who are meditating in the cave, right?
Mm,
Right? The Buddha comes
right.
back,
He comes back.
right? And
Yeah,
he says, let me show
The
you.
Bodhidharma ideal or Bodhisattva,
The
Bodhisattvic
Bodhisattva.
ideal. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Siddhartha Gautama, right? That's sort of his big claim to fame. It's not that he attained nirvana, right?
Mm,
Nirvana is something that multiple people have sort of documented attaining. It's
right,
that he chose to come back
right.
and show others how to do it as well.
So I want to talk to you about meditation because I know we both have some connection to that. But
Mhm.
before, let's just finish up with how you got into masonry real quick.
Okay, real quick,
Yeah.
super quick story.
So
So
that guy
yeah,
you said you
so I
talked to him 2 years
talked to my
later.
brother. Yeah, he sent me to the lodge, and so I showed up on a random Tuesday, and they were like, yeah, and then I kind of spent probably 3 5 months kind of really deeply contemplating it.
Mm.
And I was like, yeah, this is something I want to do.
Well, what was it that was drawing you to it in the first place? I know you said you read Dan Brown, so I'm assuming it was
Yeah,
somewhat the mystery or the deeper wisdom, or was it the symbolism? In other words, were you drawn to the esoteric stuff, or what was it that was drawing you?
yeah. So I am
Okay,
at my core, I'm a pretty esoteric guy. Like,
yeah,
we can sit here, of course, and we can have conversations about, just about anything really,
right.
and I'll either listen or I'll kind of throw my 2 cents in when I have them.
Mm.
Uh, but at my roots, like when you really want to get me going, uh, let's have something. Let's talk about something not quite so superficial, and that's when you really kind of get to see.
Right. And if you're creative, even a seemingly superficial conversation can be um coaxed into becoming something quite interesting. And that's often what I do when I'm stuck in social situations where someone's talking about something that on the surface is really boring to me, but I have to talk. I'll think of all kinds of creative ways to make this topic juicy. Let's get there.
Yeah,
I don't want to stick on the surface. Let's go. Okay, so it's golf. Let's go like about like what are your feelings when you're about to hit that ball, and what is it that's driving you? Make it more interesting to me, because I'm a social scientist. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
so and usually that kind of stuff's interesting even for people that might be more superficially inclined. They'll also find that interesting. They just don't naturally go to that
right, right.
sometimes.
That's not their modus operandi. But when you
Right.
stop and you get them to think about it for a second, they go, "Huh,
Yeah. Never
I've
thought
never
about that, but
thought
that's
about that."
interesting. Yeah, exactly. So, just a quick thing about going back to Indian food, because I wrote this down. I want to get that out there. Since you cook and you had a restaurant, what do you think about the introduction of ketchup and soy sauce into Indian cooking?
It's okay because you know what those two things are at their base.
Hmm.
It's it's salt water and it's tomato paste. Like,
Right. But I mean, would you prefer, I mean, so for, I get that. And, but I've never added ketchup into my Indian sauce, and I don't like, to put soy sauce in and make it kind of Indochine or whatever it is.
yeah,
I don't know. I guess I'm kind of a purist for the very traditional kind of village style Indian food. I feel like it's healthier. Like if you were using the ketchup because you want tomatoes, then just use the tomatoes, or
I agree
or
with you.
use paste at least,
I
or
agree with
I
you
don't
on
know.
that point.
Yeah.
But I also, I mean, if we're gonna kind of take this back to sort of all things in life, right? Like the the foundation has to exist in order for the experimentational to
That's right.
happen.
Oh
You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like we
Yeah.
don't get avant-garde cuisine without without there being that like rustic, like
Right.
traditionalist sort of
Yeah. What are those
uh, uh,
called in the craft? The guideposts of the craft, or the landmarks?
the landmarks.
Landmarks. Yeah.
Right?
There's
Yeah.
landmarks of traditional Indian cooking, and you got to stick to the landmarks. But within that, there's a lot of room for experimentation.
Right. Right. Because I mean, it's with cuisine. I mean, in general, right? Like it's like you lay the foundation down, right? You say this is a box, right?
Right.
This has four corners and four lines, and then you say, uh, you know, how can I take this so that I still have four corners and four lines and change it?
Mhm. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
that's an expression of creativity, right?
Right.
That's the creative side of cooking. Like that's
Right.
the whole. Yes, we're adhering to the basic principle of
Mhm.
four equal lines, four corners. But now I'm going to do something to it where, you were viewing it on this plane, and now I'm going to make you view it on this plane.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah. So now going back to meditation, and we talked about retreating and versus being in the world, and you like to take retreats. I like to take retreats too, and I haven't had a chance to really do that like in a formal way, like go out to nature for a weekend. I don't have that opportunity very often, but I have done a lot of meditation in the past, specifically in the 90s, the early 90s. There was a period where for almost a year I was doing about 3 hours a day of meditation, an hour in the morning, hour in the afternoon, hour at night. I was doing a lot of japa in
yeah,
between that mantra, basically, with the sort of Indian mala, the rosary.
yep,
And I was doing a lot of planetary mantras, because I was studying Vedic astrology pretty intensely at that time too,
sweet,
and Sanskrit. And and I remember, meditation at that, and I was doing more of a Zen type meditation where it's just like empty the mind and just be. So I was just
yeah,
focusing on my beingness and feeling like I was a lump of flesh until I just sort of became a vibration and just felt blissful. And what I noticed is that it is quite a blissful feeling when you're in meditation. And a lot of people, I think, that feel like meditation's hard, or it's boring, or challenging. I think that they're probably new to it, and they haven't given it that chance to actually work. But I think once the meditation starts working, I mean, I've been in meditation where I was like, going on 3-4 hours and I didn't want to come out, but I knew I
yeah.
had work to do, or I had the responsibilities. So I had to come out, but to be honest, I just preferred to just chill. I was feeling so good. I mean, you feel radiant and healthy and happy and calm. I mean, God, that's all what we all want. And it's right there inside of meditation. If you focus on it.
Yeah. I think that the hardest parts of meditation
Yeah.
are the beginning,
Yeah.
right? Um, and I mean, I'll take this back. The Renaissance, in terms of art, is some of my favorite stuff. And I've visited Italy on several occasions, and been to the Uffizi and all these places, right? And
Right.
it's amazing to think of people like Michelangelo, right, who had this massive block of marble, right,
Yeah.
and inside of it, Michelangelo would say, I see what's there, and he
Like
fearlessly goes.
almost like an instant vision. Boom. He
Right,
knows.
right, and he has this vision
Incredible.
of it, and you and I would walk past and go, well, that's a big ass lump of rock. Like, what the hell is in that, right?
Wow.
And he would be like,
Yeah.
no, I see the pietà in, like, it's. And if you
He's
look
just
at
chipping
his,
away all that the job.
right, he worked up until his death. So if you
Yeah.
look at his like unfinished works, right, like those images are like leaping out of that stone,
Yeah.
and so in a very similar way, like meditative
Wow.
practices, contemplative practices, yoga is also sort of and yoga is many things, um, when we talk
Yeah.
about meditation, I come from a Raja Yoga perspective of it. Raja Yoga is basically the science of contemplation or meditation.
The
Uh,
science
you
of
know,
what? Sorry.
meditation or contemplation,
Yeah.
right? It's whereas Hatha Yoga, right? That's where you
That's
see
the
the
king
guys,
yoga, the royal yoga, Raja.
right? Raja, right?
Is
Raj, of
that
course,
royal
means
art? Is that masonry? Think about that.
ah,
Ah, Raja
right.
yoga.
Right. So hatha yoga is sort of where we contort the physical
Right.
body, right?
That's right.
And then there's bhakti yoga, which is the yoga of devotion or
Right.
or of
Emotional love for
piety,
God.
right?
Not worried about the reasoning and all that. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Then that all figures itself out. We
Yeah. It's
just
more like just crying with your heart to God in gratitude. This is good
yeah,
bhakti.
absolutely. And then there's jnana yoga, which is the knowledge of the yoga of knowledge, of knowing,
Gnosis.
right?
Gnosis. Yeah.
Gnosis. And so Raja Yoga, when it comes to that, right, I think is very similar to that. All yoga is very similar to what Michelangelo did, right? And so if you're starting a contemplative practice, that's the hardest thing, to take that first step, because then you start chipping away at this metaphorical ashlar
Mm.
that you have, right? And what you do is you start chipping away here and you start chipping away there. And when you're, in the middle of the work and the beginning of the work, that's the hardest, because you're taking off the biggest chunks then. You're dealing with your things like your, what they call kam, krodh, moh, loh, irsha, these your lustful nature, your nature to be angry quickly, your greed, your enviousness, all of your sort of traditional, what we think of as
Right.
deadly sins, in
Your
the
attention
West.
deficit disorder, your OCD, your everything.
All those, right? You're
Yes.
coming to terms with those things in a
Yeah.
very direct manner, right? Because when you meditate, right, sure, you can go and you can practice with somebody else, but at the end of the day, you're looking at the person in the mirror, right? You're basically sticking up this big old mirror in front of yourself and going, where are the blemishes, not of my physical personal being, but of my mind, my consciousness, my spirit, right?
Right.
And that can
That's
be,
fascinating.
I mean, that can get
Yeah.
rough quick.
Yeah. I mean, you just made me think of an idea, like, the idea of looking in a mirror. I mean, I wonder if that in itself could be made into a meditation practice. Imagine like someone told you to, look at yourself in a mirror for like an hour straight every day.
Yeah.
Just look at yourself in the
Just look
mirror
at yourself.
for an hour. Just
Right.
keep
And
looking at yourself and thinking about
you'd be
yourself.
amazed at what you find on your face.
Yeah.
You
That
know what
I
I mean?
wonder what that would be like. I've looked at myself, to see if my hair is okay or how do I look,
Right.
been back and
But
forth like that, but never for an extended period of time.
it's a
I've never stared
cursory
in a mirror for an hour
it's a
or 2
cursory
hours.
glance, right? I mean,
Right.
and yeah, I mean, but you look not in the sense of vanity, right? You look in the sense of knowing. You know, you and I are both bearded men, right? And we both, you know, you're rocking the Vic look, and I've got this full old head of hair. But like, imagine what it would be like to know every follicle of hair. Like, that's the kind of knowing I want.
Yeah,
that's the kind of gnosis I want.
Deep
you know
and broad.
I mean? Yeah,
Deep and
you know
broad.
what I mean?
That's awesome, man. Let's see. I got some questions here we talked about discussing. Well, one thing is, you know, you're a younger Mason, and so I wanted to get your perspectives on Masonry today for a young person. Like, how accommodating is it? How tailored is it to younger people today, as well as the older people? I mean, because we don't want to just tailor it for one age group. But do you feel like Masonry has been modified, or, you know, or for younger people to any degree, or do you think it's still kind of not so inviting for a younger generation?
Um, I think that it's sort of a multifaceted question, and if we
Yeah.
if we get into the weeds of it, I think you asked me at a different point. You asked me, you know, is masonry dying, or something along those lines, and I sort of I would almost ask a couple of questions, right? Is that a bad thing? B, uh, you know, if you come from the part of the world I come from, there is death is just as vital as life, because
Right.
there's life, death, or there's birth, death, and
Right.
rebirth.
And that some things are should meant to die, like shells, or the skin of the snake.
Hmm.
That's best that those come off. But the heart of masonry itself can never die.
No, and
You know
but
what I mean?
that is right, and
Yeah.
again, that's because, like, again, it goes back to part of that whole Eastern worldview, right? Of the self, the true self,
Right.
the consciousness, the spirit, that never dies. There's no death to that.
Right.
All it does, right, is it takes on a new form,
Mm.
right? And I hear a lot of sort of, I don't know if I hear it so much now, but I heard it back when I initially joined. A lot of the younger guys that I hung out with, and a lot of the guys that I associated with, were like, man, you know, these old guys have lost the way of Freemasonry. Like, they're not, you know, they're not practicing Masonry, or they're not doing this, that, or the other. And I'm like, well, you know, in my opinion, it's sort of like this thing that Masonry throughout the ages has, um, it served a particular function. You know, and if we talk about sort of the golden age, right, of golden age of Freemasonry, post World War II era, right? Um, I think Masonry served a different purpose to those guys,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? I mean, just to examine it from like a psychological level, right? Like, so many of those people went over and fought in a war, and saw some some Jeffrey Epstein level shit,
Yeah.
you know. And when they
Trauma.
came back, they maybe what they needed wasn't necessarily some deep knowledge. Like, they didn't need some deep understanding of why that type of thing
Right.
happened,
Right.
right? They just needed somebody next to them to go, yeah, we were both there. Yeah, it happened. Um, and yeah, like, when I call you brother, that has a deeper meaning to it, you
Exactly.
know? And and
Exactly.
and and I mean, like I said, some of those older guys, man, they live and die for each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, no, I agree with that, and I think we shouldn't be elitist in masonry at all. I mean, even though, you know, I myself could be attracted to, you know, traditional observance lodge or more esoteric lodges, you know, I might be joining one or two of those in the future if things open up again. But it doesn't mean I don't appreciate, for example, my mother lodge, which has a diverse group of stakeholders in it, and I think that actually, as a mason, gives you more growth opportunities in a way. I mean, sure, the pure esoteric lodge, if you're into that, you know, you could be surrounded by everybody that's always having deep conversation. You can get that that passion and get that insight, or the insights you're looking for perhaps. But you don't get to test yourself in different circumstances. And I think there's a real value in having to sit down with an 80-year-old guy who maybe is not esoteric at all and have a conversation while we're having dinner together with someone like me who's very esoteric. Now there's the work, there's the craft. Are you able to do that? Or are you too in your own little world that you can't adjust to a different circumstance in the world? And you can't do that dance with that man and do it well. So to me, you need to get sort of like your blade sharpened, through these real life experiences, the diverse life experiences that exist, rather than being in a bubble of what you love. You know what I mean? And that's why I think we should travel too, because I think coming outside of our box to go to another country, a very different country. Don't just go to the hotel that has American food and stay in your hotel. You're not actually traveling. Why did you waste your flight, to go all the way there so it looks like where you came from? That doesn't make sense. It's not, there's no added value or very little added value. So you really want to have a cultural experience, So for me, I like to go to countries that are quite different. I spent a lot of time in Africa, and when I was there, I spent times in the village. I lived with African families, poor ones. I slept like them. I went to the bathroom in the hole in the ground where they did. I ate their food. I learned their language. I got, made fun of. They laughed at me. This is how you're going to grow. You need to test your boundaries, and you need to flex, and you need to have that will to adapt and to grow. Otherwise, you're frightened and you're in a bubble. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And here's the real kind of shitty thing, right? Is like you're trapped, you're scared, you're in the bubble, right? The problem is the bubble's gonna pop anyway. So you might as well make the best use of it.
You could try as long as you want to keep that bubble all protected, but God's gonna find a way in.
Oh man, like yeah, I have a son, and initially when he was born, right, my biggest thing was like, okay, I have this thing. I have to protect it. 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 And like one of my, I think, greatest sort of things as a dad that I've recently come to discover is that that's not my job. My job isn't to protect, right? Because the world or whoever or whatever's gonna get him.
Yeah.
Right. My job is to make him courageous and competent enough so that when things do come to get him, he bites back.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why I think as a parent, it's very important to install the elements of a good heart and a good mind in your children, because those are the capacities that they're gonna have to work with in this world. So, in terms of the heart, you want to install a sense of morality, and you want to help your children develop morally, some sense of ethics and values and virtues and integrity, right? That's a lot of what the Blue Lodge focuses on. And those are the things of the heart, and then at the same time, you want them to have that critical thinking ability, that logic and that reason. And ideally you want them to have a marriage of those two, to not be Mr. Nerdy, rational, logical with no feeling or ability to empathize or any creativity or artistic capacity destroyed. No, you want really that mix of the right and the left.
The reason Spock can be Spock is because Kirk is Kirk.
That's right. Yeah. And they both are each other's medicine.
Absolutely.
It's like the two pillars.
Yeah.
They're there as teachers.
Yeah, and I kind of want to take that back to your point that you were making earlier. Absolutely, there's a point in pushing yourself. You were talking earlier about, yes, we can sit here as a room full of esoterics, but it's like, what did we do at the end of the day? Well, we did esoterics. Okay, well, cool. How much brotherhood did we do? How much
cigar smoking did we do? Not much. Oh, you've got one. I'd love to have one, but I'm in my house. What do you smoke, by the way?
These are cigarettes.
Which kind? Camel?
Camel menthol, yeah.
Camel menthol, yeah.
But I'm a voracious pipe smoker. I do smoke the occasional cigar, but I'm a voracious pipe smoker.
Well, I might want advice on pipe smoking. I've smoked on and off in my life. I've been a social smoker that's gotten out of hand.
Yeah.
And you know, where I've actually ended up buying a pack every few days for myself, and then got off after a few months. I've never been like year after year consistent smoker. And I have sensitive lungs, so I can get a chronic cough, so I have to be careful.
Uh,
Um, but pipe, I've been attracted to pipes, and I like the idea of the long pipe. Because
yeah,
part of me feels like that must smooth the smoke, because
it
that's part of my
does.
problem is I can't handle the smoke in my lungs. So I'm looking for
Yeah.
ways to smooth it. And I don't want to smoke out of a water bong or anything. Even those, actually, I have a problem with shisha. It makes me cough,
Oh,
you
really?
know? Yeah. And some
Well,
say, "Oh, you got to clean the shisha. You have to know how to take care of it." And I've been to like shisha bars in West Africa and smoked. And even with the guy running around cleaning constantly, it still bothers me. So it's hard, but
yeah,
I appreciate it as a social activity though.
I do too. It's always fun. It's a nice conversation piece.
Yeah.
I always find, and once you kind of, I actually got into pipes before I got into cigarettes and cigars. But there's this 18, 19-year-old kid out there looking like Sherlock Holmes, and it was at least
Yeah.
it was a nice conversation piece. Like you said, it was something that was exoteric that would then lead to deeper conversations, and you get to know somebody,
Right.
Um,
So,
yeah, yeah,
let's see. I have a bunch of things here to potentially talk about. We probably won't cover everything. We got a little bit of time left, but I mean, let's talk about Masonic research. Maybe that would be interesting, and
yeah.
not in a formal sense, but just everybody that's a Mason, that's especially if you're interested in the deeper meaning and the mysteries of Masonry, you're gonna start doing research of your own. You're gonna start thinking. I'd love to learn about your own personal process. Like, what do you do? How do you do your research? Do you use Google a lot? Do you use Wikipedia? Do you reflect? I mean, just tell me about your process of trying to understand this world.
Yeah. So I think what I do is it's probably a twofold process. And it kind of harkens back to what we were talking about with cooking. When I come upon a subject or something that I find interesting, I go and I try to read about it first of all, right? And read, and I also talk to. Uh, I start opening my mouth. I talk to her. I go, "Hey, are you familiar with what's this
Right.
Kabbalah thing?" Right?
Yeah.
Remember, like you gotta. I come from an Eastern background, right? And so
Right.
some of my formative work has been sort of in this marriage of East and West,
Mm,
because so much of what we do right now in Freemasonry is based on the Western esoteric tradition, and that's not a
definitely.
bad thing. I think there are definitely um, connections to Eastern esoteric traditions in Freemasonry.
Right. Right.
I just think that right now, in terms of what's available to the people who are interested in that type of thing, is the West.
Sure.
And so I start open, and when I initially joined, I was like, oh yeah, I know this thing, or oh yeah, hey, that makes sense to me. But then, somebody would say something like, well, are you familiar with the tree of life? Or, hey, do you know anything about this whole like alchemy thing? Or, and so at that point, what I started doing would be something like I would go read, right? And so I don't particularly watch a whole lot of television. I do a lot more reading, and I do a lot more talking to brothers who may know something. And what I've often found is that guys may not know something, but they'll know somebody who knows something. And so there's like almost this like, now we've got like three things built into this one little beautiful package where I'm learning, I'm making a new brother, and I'm also moving forward. Now, once I sort of feel like I've got that foundation down, right? Once I feel like I've got the rustic pasta pomodoro down, right? Well, now I think to myself, now I kind of go into the contemplative stage of it. And now it's like, well, what are my own ruminations about this? What are my own thoughts about this? Where else can I create connections to this? And that, after I do that, then we either kind of and I've been pretty bad about this in my early years. I've recently sort of started trying to rectify it, but I go and write it down because I have a decent memory, but it you know, if that memory were to ever fail, I want to have a backup plan.
Yeah, memory is interesting. You know, I mean, when I first got into masonry, I didn't have an appreciation for like memory work or, you know, memorizing, you know, lines or verses or whatever. I didn't really see why that's important. It seemed very rote. I had a very negative impression of rote memorization. You know, I was all about like, I want the meaning, I want the insights. Why would I be doing rote memorization? What's the benefit? Why are we wasting our time? You know, and that was kind of my impression in the beginning. And then I thought, well, let me find out a little bit more about the memory. Maybe there's some good reason for this. Why would they be doing this in masonry? Why
Right.
why would there be such a focus on memory work? Is memory somehow important? And then I think I came across, I can't remember if it was Aristotle had a book called The Art of Memory. Was it somebody wrote, one of these old Greek philosophers had a book on memory. And in there was something that made a lot of sense to me, is that somehow the act of remembering, I mean, look at even in Islam, they talk about remembrance of Allah,
Right.
and that whole idea of turning back and remembrance. And when you think about the experience of revelation, you know, which just sounds like a really big word, but I think that in fact, any aha moment you have can be considered a revelation. You know, maybe it's not as great as like an apocalyptic vision of chariots in the sky or whatever, but you have insights. Those are revelations. They just pop into your mind. You're like, whoa, I just thought of something. And
Every
it
moment of
feels like
Sonder,
memory.
every moment of Sonder
Yeah.
that you have, right, is like that.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like, oh shit, this person, like, holy crap, right?
Yes.
Complete, like, individual, not just some extra in the background of my movie.
Right.
Right. They're the star of their own movie.
Yes.
You know, and I'm you know, bearded fellow number 4, you know,
Yeah.
in their movie.
Yeah.
But
And you're in my movie. I mean, what are the odds of that? We're in each other's movie here.
right,
You know?
right. And I mean that in and of itself. And then there's of course that sort of ultimate sense of realization where you go, it is a movie. It is all, you know, illusory in a sense. You know, it is all that way. You know, it's all. It's not this. You know.
Right. It's a lot more.
Yeah, yeah, and it. You know, it's you find moment. I mean, you find those aha moments if you look and you listen, right? Right, like it's so often that we don't listen well enough either in today's day and age. There are times where I love the sound of my own voice so much, and I have to remind myself, hey, asshat, shut up.
Sorry. I think that, you know, passion is a really good thing. And, you know, even, we talk about it as zeal and masonry and the red color of the Royal Arch. And even in, you know, from the Vedic tradition, they say that those that are of a fiery temperament or more rajasic might be better in yoga and in this divine path, because they have that fire, that passion, that drive, that intensity, to really burn through the dross a little faster. But what that could also lead to is passionate people often talk too much, you know, because you get excited, you have a lot to share, and you have a lot you're thinking about, and you want to talk about it. It's not a bad thing. It's actually a sign that you have passion. You're alive and you're dynamic and you want to engage, which is a good thing. It's about really controlling that power and that.
Right, and that's yoga, right?
Yes.
Like, that's yoga. That's
oh yeah, that's
the
the great work.
or the sanction of those passions, and knowing when to let them ebb and when to let them flow. That's the work. That's right. Or yoga, or
right,
whatever you want to call it. Yeah,
restraint. Yeah. All right, but so let's see.
Real quick, so back to
Yes.
memory, you know, they
Go ahead.
also
Oh yeah,
talk
back to
about
memory.
that.
Yeah.
They
Wait,
talk
but can
that.
I just finish on that? There was one other
Yeah.
little fine point I wanted to make, and I don't know if it's related to what you're going to say, but in a nutshell, what it came down to is that when you think about remembering, when you're trying to remember, like if it's in the ritual and you're trying to remember, you basically can't really do anything to remember. You have to just sort of sit and wait and get into a receptive state and hope it comes. And you're just like, what was that line? The next word, and you're just like kind of looking up, and they're waiting for it to come to you. That's insight. That's revelation. And I feel like if you're always trying to remember, and you practice memory work, and you're always trying to remember things, it's really a good practice for opening that gateway to revelation. It's like a muscle.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they talk about you know, Sandhyavandanams in the Vedic culture, right? Which is your ovulations at the at the morning, the afternoon. You know, when the sun is transitioning, is what they talk about. The morning, the afternoon, the evening, and then at like the midnight hour, when it's at its sort of lowest. And so often those are just mechanical things, right?
Right.
And they talk about this thing, right? It's like you do these things mechanistically, but if you have the proper sort of spirit behind it, or at least if you're open towards that spirit, at some point it's going to drop in, you know. And even if you're doing japa and it's mechanical, right? At some point that that caritas is gonna come in, you know.
I
It's
like
gonna
that. The
it's
Caritas.
gonna yeah, you know, it's gonna.
I love Caritas.
I know you do. I couldn't leave here without
Yeah.
mentioning it at least
So
once.
nice.
I know. And so it's that idea of being receptive to it, right? But if you're doing the mechanical things, one of these days you'll do it and it won't be mechanical. It's the same with contemplation and meditation, right? It's like when you start, it's weird, right? You sit down and
Right.
you're like, okay, I guess here we go.
Right.
Well, and but you're
It's sort of like the difference between like doing japa and being the japa.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Where it's like pervades you and it's like a bliss, you know,
right.
like water, you know, like nectar flowing from your lips, and then it totally settles to become in your heart.
Yeah.
And then it's just a resonance. It's the word
Yeah, yeah, and that's, I mean,
pervading.
that's, and in like that's one thing I think I try to do, right, is like, where is God? God is everywhere, right?
Mm.
God is all things, all time, all space, and it's like to be able to see that, like to have that, like, you remember the old, like the Matrix movies, right? Like
Oh yeah.
when you see the code, right? Like that's it.
Mm.
So
Yeah, yeah.
and to realize that like all of that stuff is, I mean, that movie has its own sort of, you could probably do a whole esoterics of that
Oh,
film
and then people
franchise.
have. I mean, there's a lot, I think, on YouTube about the esoteric symbolism in the Matrix and stuff. You can
Yeah,
find a lot of that stuff. And
yeah,
Gnostic correlates with Gnosticism. I think people have done a lot of good analysis on that.
yeah.
Let's see. Okay, let's talk about humor. I mean, you
Mm.
know, I like to joke a lot. You know, some people don't like my jokes sometimes. I mean, I'm not like offensive, I don't think. I mean, maybe I am sometimes. I hope not. I'm sorry if I am. I try to be as PC as I can be. But I like to joke, and you know, some people that are more serious don't like that sometimes. But I found that, you know, in Masonry, I found brothers that I can relate to, because I think Masons joke a lot. Masons joke
Yeah.
a lot. We joke a lot. We joke in the lodge room, and people, and it's encouraged to have a sort of sense of humor and not take yourself so seriously. I think that's a great thing. I mean, what do you think about the spirituality of humor, and like the relevance of humor to being a spiritual person?
Oh my goodness. I think it's paramount, you know. Um I can't help but but bring up Brother Joe Martinez. You know,
No
he'll.
souls in masonry, Joe Martinez. That's
Yeah,
his thing.
that's his thing, right? And like, you know, incredibly deep, incredibly profound person, right? But
Right.
also one of the quickest whips, you
Oh
know.
yeah.
Uh,
Hard to keep up with him.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
and I think it's absolutely great to joke, right? Um, we've already kind of established, right? The world is out to get you.
Yeah.
And so there's who knows what kind of, I mean, we like to think we know, right? When we sit next to our brother in lodge, right? And we know what's going on in the deepest, darkest places of his heart, right?
Right.
We like to think that we know what kind of tussles are going on, but occasionally we don't, because our brothers aren't ready to talk to us, or they, for whatever reason, right?
Mm.
And what we do is we make some little quip or some little and all that happens is for a moment that smile flashes across their face, right? Is
Right.
that a bad thing? I
No.
don't think so. I
No.
think that of course there's a time and a place for it,
Right.
right?
Yeah. You can't, they're like say at a funeral, you're not going to be like cracking jokes and stuff like that.
Right,
Not a good
right.
idea. Not so respectful.
I
You
think, yeah, I think, and that's part of that circumscription, right? That's like
Right.
knowing when to bind
That's
those
right.
desires, right? Like, and
That's
I'm
part of the
I'm the
work.
first one. I'm the first one to, like, if there's an inappropriate joke to be made, I I am front and center making that joke right then and there, right? But like, I also then have to constantly be in this state of reminder of myself. Of, okay, we're having this discussion on this, or we're in the middle of ritual. This is not the time. Afterwards, right, when we close down and we're all sitting, sitting in the festive board or whatever to
Right.
crack, that's a great time to go, hey, remember when you did this?
Yes. Yes.
you know
And in fact, I
um
think, we should have a sense of humor about ourselves. We should be able to laugh at ourselves and not take ourselves so seriously. I think it'll help to overcome the limitations of the ego, the
i
personality,
I
to be
think
able to
so as
laugh at
well.
it. And because if you could laugh at your own personality and your own ego, that's a good sign that you're starting to separate from it.
Yeah, yeah. I personally, I'm also this, uh there's a word in Sanskrit called stitaprajna, right? Stitaprajna is this concept that the person who remains serene or tranquil or within great knowing in both great sorrow and great pleasure,
Ah, yes.
right? So it's like,
That's like true freedom right there.
I mean, that's it, right? Like, uh,
That's
to
liberty.
to be able to remain steadfast in both of those scenarios, right?
Yes.
If I can laugh with the same fervency and zeal that I cry with, right? And I can understand that both of those things and all of the gray in between of those two things is all passing,
All passing. Yeah.
right? Then,
Epiphenomena.
yeah, then,
It's part of the acting,
then,
the drama, the Maya.
right. And I mean,
Right.
that's what it is, right? Then I'm able to handle both these great tragedies and these epitomes that occur in my life, with hopefully with some modicum of serenity and grace.
That's awesome. So, Brother Parth Patel, I think this is probably, we've gone on long enough. I don't want to kill people. I know everyone's so busy these days, and I don't want to end up like Joe Rogan with these 3-hour episodes. People just can't keep up, man. I mean, people are dropping like flies off refracted light presentations these days. I mean, you're not seeing as many. I think it's because at the beginning, everybody was so excited. This whole new platform, we're all online now. COVID just started, and then people
Yeah,
realized I cannot do education 24/7. I've got a job, or I've got a family. I've got things I got to do. You know what I mean? So it'll
yeah.
come to its own rhythm, I think, naturally.
I
Um,
think it will as well. I think
yeah,
I think that anytime you have a new tool, right, there's this propensity to use it.
that's right.
I do a lot of woodworking, right? So it's like when you get a new tool, it's like, oh man, I want to get a new tool out. And then eventually over time, it becomes part of the repertoire.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
so once you're done sort of playing with it, is what I call it, right? Well, then the work begins.
Yeah,
Now you know how and when to use that tool,
that's
and
right.
when it is to be utilized. And I don't think I think what we've done there is we've gone out and gone into the you know the shop of Freemasonry and used our currency to buy a new tool. And we played around with it for a little while.
Right.
I don't think we're returning it.
No,
I think what's going to happen is we're going to start using it. Um, we're going to find out what the where that tool has best served us. You
that's
know,
right. Yeah, it's going to come into its natural rhythm and it's going to understand its role, over time through experience. And it's not going to go away or go down. I think it's just going to mature as a mechanism for education. Um, so anyway, brother, I'm really happy you came on the show. This has been great, easy conversation, easy chatting with you, man. We got to do it in real life and talk about some recipes
for sure, man. I
and
can't
have a
wait.
drink and maybe smoke out of your long pipe.
You got
That'd
it.
be awesome.
For sure, brother. The doors
Yes.
are open.
All right,
Absolutely.
bro.
Hey, it was phenomenal. Thank you so much
Thank you so much.
for having
Namaste.
me,
Huh?
brother. Absolutely.
Say hi to
Namaste.
the family.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Cheers.
I'll see you soon, brother.